Alright, the game is Terrible Swift Sword. This is the old SPI, now TSR version of the original Monster Game Classic. The TSR version has a fairly infamous pink and green map, which I've discussed at length in other videos, but I finally fired this up to play. We are playing the Grand Campaign. This is the full 3-day battle. We are on just starting the 9 a.m. turn on July 1st. As you can see here, First Corps is moving up the Emmetsburg Road. Another division, or a brigade rather, of the First Corps came in over there at location 13 along the trail. And they're going to be kind of winding their way along the back roads here to catch up with the rest of the First Corps, which will travel up the Emmetsburg Road and into the town of Gettysburg, and then quickly over here to McPherson's Ridge. As you can see, there's the McPherson Farm. There's McPherson's Woods there next to it. The Emmetsburg Pike, or the Chambersville Pike, rather. There, where the railroad cut is, this is where most of the heaviest fighting was early on the first day, July 1st. Currently, you can see, let me move the camera over to the other side of the board so we can get a better look, more close up of what's going on here. So, the original Union position was up along kind of this ridge line here. Heath, you've got, this is Davis's brigade here. Archer's brigade is over here, which I detached because he is out of Heath's command range, and I wanted him to be able to press the attack. So these were the initial units, and then as you can see coming out behind here is Brockenbrough, and over here is, I think that's Pettigrew, yep. And the artillery formed up along the ridge here. So typically I'm fairly cautious when I'm advancing with the Confederates, but here, given that in this game there's no restriction on how quickly the Confederates can move, I thought, well, let's just press heavily into the Union troops. And I am playing with the skirmisher rules here, which significantly reduce the casualties on both sides during this advance, this early portion of the first day, which is more historically accurate. The cavalry here was always deployed in skirmish on the first day, and they only lost, in this whole delaying action that they did before the First Corps was able to pitch into the fight. Cavalry only lost about 200 men, so the casualties were very low. They didn't inflict a lot of casualties on the Confederates either, so the skirmisher rules reflect that by shifting everyone a column to the left, meaning on the fire table, meaning that all these 3 strength or less units are going to be on the 0 fire column, or 0 to less than 0 or 0 to 1. I forget which one it is, but that's the lowest small arms fire column. And by and large, a lot of the Confederates are going to be on that same table, because a lot of these Confederate regiments are pretty small here in Archer's and Davis's brigades. I think there's a 6 in there somewhere, which would put him on the 2nd column then, instead of that lowest column on the CRT, but that's only a couple of regiments in these initial attacking brigades. So what I did was move Archer and Davis over onto this flank, and kind of left this side, which was Devon's brigade, largely unscathed. I put some artillery over here to take some pot shots, although the artillery is shifting a column to the left too, So at this range, we were looking at like an 8 hex range there. That's really not a very good idea, because you're tracking your artillery ammo here. They've only got 8 rounds before you have to resupply them. So you do want to be judicious with your artillery, and taking pot shots at skirmishers has almost no chance to have any effect. So I kind of wasted some shots on those guys. The lone Union artillery, that's horse artillery here. It's the what is that? 2nd U.S. Battery A. I think they were initially positioned here. I retired by prolong when I realized, oh, the Confederates are pressing very heavily, so I shouldn't be spending a lot of time firing. I need to get these guys back off the line, because everybody's got to back up. But they did get one. They did some counter battery fire over here, and I rolled a 6, which actually destroyed a gun. And then when you destroy a gun, you have a chance of hitting the caisson. So if you get a numerical casualty on counter battery fire, you roll the die again, and on a 1, that blows up a caisson. So I rolled a 1, and so then you roll the die again to see how many rounds of ammunition are blown up. And so I blew up an extra 2 rounds, so that gun's already down to 4 rounds of ammunition. So this has been interesting playing one of these side-mounted counter games, because when the counters are side-mounted, you don't need to clip the corners. So this is one of the few times that I'm actually playing a game with counters that have these perfectly square corners on them, which is kind of cool. It almost makes up for the hideous map. Although I have to admit, the map is kind of growing on me a little bit. I think just because it's a simple map. It's a little less intimidating than the Last Chance for Victory map, or Rick Barber's Summer Storm map, which is what I was just playing Thunder at the Crossroads on. That one is it looks gorgeous, but you got to study it a little closer to pick out all the terrain features and elevation shifts. This just is a pretty clean and simple. You've got 6 levels of elevation, as opposed to like the Last Chance for Victory map, which has elevation levels in the teens and is a little bit harder to read in that regard. It takes a little more focus. This I can kind of sit back, have a drink, not worry as much, or not have to be quite so heavily concentrated as I feel like I need to be with Last Chance for Victory. Although the mechanisms, the rules, combat rules, and so forth in Last Chance for Victory are really very simple. The line of battle system is a very simple system because it's been so heavily refined into from what the old regimental sub-series used to be, which was CWB, also very what I would consider kind of mechanically process heavy systems in terms of all the dice you have to roll through on your various combat and morale checks and so forth. This feels like it has much less die rolling, but there are some pretty fiddly rules in here for things like your morale and having to look up stuff like you're retired by prolong and everything, and the charts are not good in this game. And really there aren't any charts. It's all in the instructions. And so what I did was I scanned the charts that are kind of scattered through the last couple pages of the instructions and printed them out on cardstock, just so I would have separate charts to be able to use. But they're not intuitive and they're not well organized, and so that is kind of a downer, because as sort of clean and as the map is and everything, where I feel like the movement seems pretty easy and facing and everything, Zocs are all pretty easy in this. Once you're actually fighting, trying to remember, okay, let's see, routes on this, what's the movement for route, and then just keeping skirmisher rules in mind, like, oh, these guys are all in skirmish formation, so they can retreat up to 2 hexes, doing a retreat before melee instead of 1 hex. But if they do retreat 2 hexes, they have to roll for route, but their route might be modified by just so every game has that, but this is made just a little bit worse, because a lot of times you can pick up a lot of that stuff from the charts, in the game, and this just doesn't offer that. So anyway, as you can see here, I'm aggressively moving up with Brockenbrough and with Pettigrew to try and just push these cavalry troops back as quickly as possible, possibly get them back to McPherson's Ridge and maybe out of position on McPherson's Ridge before the First Corps can even come up. So will they be able to do that? I've gotten some pretty decent rolls on my for my cav. They did get a little bit disordered here. You can see this line isn't quite as neat because I did a couple of and you can see Buford, I moved him up because I needed an auto rally here because a couple of the guys, because the Confederates pushed in so quickly, I opted to do the 2 hex retreat before melee rule for the skirmishers. And when they do that, they have to make a morale check, and 2 of these units failed, and so as a result they could only move 1 hex on the subsequent movement phase. So that's left this line a little bit more jumbled than Devon's much cleaner line over here on the right flank. So also the artillery here has kind of complicated things, because what I really should have done was I left him there on the second turn. I should have moved him. I guess I just finished the second turn, so maybe should have moved him on the first turn instead of firing. I don't know. It's a tough call for the artillery, because that's the one chance that the Union troops have to really get a decent shot of doing some damage to the Confederates on that first turn. You know, the skirmishing, the low level or the low column that I'm on for units in skirmish formation is not going to have a good chance of inflicting any casualties, but that artillery could. So on the other hand, you don't want to lose the artillery, and they're in danger of that now. I had to prolong it back and join and keep this line close to it so it wouldn't get surrounded and eliminated. I stuck an infantry, stuck I stuck a cavalry unit skirmisher on top of it, just in case the Confederates get really frisky. They didn't charge here initially with Davis because he was max move just to get adjacent, so he didn't have the extra movement point to or I guess you don't need an extra movement point to melee. Crap. I was initially confused melee with moving up onto a unit and then meleeing, and then, you know, read further in the rules and realized no, they just move adjacent, and then anybody who's adjacent can melee. So I think I did that wrong last turn. I think he should have been able to melee well, no, never mind, because the retire by prolong happens in defensive fire phase. So yeah, I did it right. He was able to prolong out of there before the melee phase happened. So so I did it right. False alarm. Anyway, so here's where things stand now. The one drawback to pushing forward aggressively with the Confederate infantry is your artillery is set up back here and is not going to have much of an effect. But as it is, with the skirmisher rules, I don't think the artillery is going to have too much of an effect anyway. So this is really, they're really not going to be of much use until the First Corps gets up and the infantry gets up, and hopefully by then I can have them limbered up and moved up to a new line to confront the Union infantry with. So we'll see where it goes.